In this video, I'm going to be showing you how you can start real estate investing by house hacking, living for free, or living very close to it. So the first place we're going to start is how are we going to get finance for this property? You may or may not know an FHA loan is 3.5% down, which is a phenomenal way to get started with a 2 to 4 residential primary residence. And a pre-qualification is from a lender. It's common if you want to look at either a credit union or a broker just to get multiple quotes or opinions, but the first thing is you want to get pre-qual. And in this case here, where pre-qual is $300,000. So we're looking at properties at $300,000 and below. And this is for a 2 to 4 unit primary residence. And the benefit of that is you're going to get owner occupied rate instead of an investment rate. Typically, the owner occupied rate is around 3% and the investment rate is around 4%. So when you get approved for the mortgage, your main payment every month is called your PITI, your principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. This payment you'll be making monthly for the life of the loan. And typically it's a 30-year fixed loan. With that, these 4 components make up the PITI payment on a monthly basis. You're going to want to start analyzing the property. So, like I said, we're pre-approved for $300,000, but we're looking at properties less than that, and this number will change based on the purchase price of the property. So, our sample house is $250,000. And our principal interest payment is $1049. In the beginning of the loan, this is very heavily interest based, but near the end of the loan, you're going to be paying a lot towards the principal. $1049 a month. For the taxes, this is something you could find on Zillow. Or if you have an MLS feed from an agent, you could find that as well. This is times 12, so it's $3,600 a year, but we're just doing this on a monthly basis. Next is the insurance. This is $125 or $1,500 a year. And that's something you're going to be paying as well. So our total payment here is $1,682. But let's just call this property a 2-family. And one of the units is renting for $1,000. You'd be living in the other unit. So the payment that you're going to be coming up with every month is $682. Since you have a tenant who's paying you $1,000 a month, you would write up an agreement, but you're the owner of the property and you're inheriting that tenant. Let's just say they pay $1,000. That means you're coming out $682 out of pocket a month instead of that $1,682. So it's just a major difference overall if you are having the ability to have someone help assist you with the mortgage. Next, how to finance them or how to find these properties. It's really common to want to look at a huge radius, but I would recommend to narrow it down into specific locations. One of the best sites you can use to start learning the school districts is greatschools.org. And with that website, they'll rate the schools anywhere from 1 to 10. And primarily you want to look at elementary and high school. Now this is just a personal preference, but depending on the size of the town or the city you're looking at, the elementary schools that are highly rated and typically the high schools are also highly rated. If it's an area where both are lower, it's just not going to be as strong typically as a safe area. You can also drive at night, drive during the day, drive during different times to get an idea. And another tip is if it's surrounded by single family homes. If you're looking at a spot that has 80-90% multifamily homes, that gives you an idea of the area as well. It varies heavily street by street, but I'd recommend looking for a multifamily in a neighborhood where you can look at the median income as well. And you can just see the average household income in that area. You can also look at what attracts people to that specific location, such as hospitals, Or another one I like to use is the Starbucks Whole Food test. If they're putting in a brand new location, or that's a recent location, I mean, those companies spend millions of dollars trying to figure out where to put these locations. They're not going to put it in a spot. They're going to put it in a spot where a specific demographic, a specific income, and a specific clientele is going to be shopping there. So I like to look at that as well to give an idea, the class of the area. We sometimes call it, A, B, C, D class properties. But you also got to be living there, so you want to consider, should I live there, or would I live there? And if typically I'd want to live in an area that's personally probably at least a B minus. So a solid area with a strong tenant pool to choose from as well. So financing before seeing the house. Before you can actually start seeing property, that is a pretty extensive process. You don't just need a down payment. In this case, it's for that $250 house, it'd be a down payment of 3.5. That's going to be $7,000 for the down payment. Oh, I'm sorry. That's actually around $11,000 for the down payment. You're also going to need closing cost, which a seller can potentially pay for depending on how competitive the offer scenario is, but it's typically 3% of the purchase price. And then you will likely need reserves as well. So a number that's a good number to stick with is, to be safe, I'd probably recommend in the ballpark of 7 to 12% of the purchase price saved. I like that number. It's nice and safe. 12 might be a little high, but it also gives you something to shoot for if you're trying to save for a down payment, let's say in 6, 12, 18, 24 months. You also want to save for the closing cost as well as potential Capex reserves. Now, the conditions of the house. FHA wants a house that's essentially structurally sound. You're not going to be able to buy a property that needs a ton of work or a ton of rehab as an FHA property. If you do, there's another type of loan that's called an FHA 2 or 3K loan, but we're really not going to go over that here. The condition needs to be very solid. You can't buy anything that a bank won't finance. So things that you want to look for specifically is a property that's structurally sound and one that is essentially more move-in ready than not. So now a few things. Once you have a property, let's back up. So once you have the financing, you are pre-approved from a lender, then you're able to start looking at properties. When you're able to start looking at properties, you want to look at specific areas, specific school districts, and know your tenant class. Once you have a property, you find the right property, you're ready to make an offer on the property. If your offer gets accepted, you can move forward and you have this inspection period. With that, it's common that it's 7 to 10 days. And most people just want to have a home inspector, and that is an out-of-pocket expense as well as a buyer. So depending on how many units and depending on the state, that could range anywhere, I would say, from $450 up to $950, and depending on what services you have them choose to provide. So here is a detailed report you're going to get on the property. It's typically anywhere from 30 to 50 pages, and it's going to outline all the potential problems on the property. Every property is going to have problems. Most of the multifamilies in Mass are built pre-1940, so in this case, you need to know that the house is still most likely structurally sound if it's been standing that long. And you got to figure out what you're comfortable with in terms to cosmetic work, or if you have tenants in there, long-term tenants, you're actually going to get there. But you have a 7 to 10 day inspection period, and let's just say you spend this inspection money, and the inspection report comes back, and there's something, you talk to your agent, there's something in the ballpark of $15,000 you think it needs in repairs that you want to ask the seller for. That's possible, but if you're not able to come to an agreement, you're essentially out that inspection money. You don't get that back. So you would be out the $450 to $950, but again, you won't be purchasing the property, so you begin the process over. So from my take, it's almost better to know than not to know, especially when you're going to be investing thousands, to know for that price if the property's the right fit for you. Now, a budget for maintenance or Capex. So like I said initially, you're going to be having the down payment money, which is 3.5, the closing cost, which is essentially 3% of the purchase price. But keep in mind, the seller may be able to assist you depending on the offer and how many offers you're competing against. So seller may be able to pay for these. And then your Capex. So I like to budget anywhere from 3 to 5% initially of the purchase price. Now it may seem like a lot, because if our property here is $250, and let's just keep these easy numbers, let's just say we're right in the middle at 7 to 12, 10%. That means you should have $25,000 before beginning to look at properties. And it seems like a lot, but you want to be in a spot where you have to make a repair, or you have to do something to a chimney or a roof or a water heater or a boiler. And you might have a bill of $1,000, $1,500, $2,000. You want to be prepared to already have that money kind of set aside so you're not scrambling just when it does happen. So that's why when you rent out the building, they're paying down the mortgage, but you're responsible for every single repair done to that building since you're the owner of the property. Next, in that 250 property that we're purchasing here, you are inheriting a tenant. And what's that really mean? That means their current agreement was $1,000, and with that, that's what they're going to be paying you when you are now the owner of the property, if they are a tenant at will. You can check the market rents through sites such as Zillow, or if you have MLS feed listing from your agent, you can get an idea of the market rents by comparing it to similar either 2-bed or 3-bed properties in the area. Keep in mind, you're also going to look at if the tenant's paying down utilities, or if there's off-street parking in your area. That might be a pretty big deal. But if you wanted to increase your rent here from $1,000 to, let's say, $1,200, if they are a tenant at will, this varies by state, but you could draft up a new agreement and potentially increase your rent on the building to market rent. Typically that could be $1,100, $1,200, depending on your market, but you have the ability to increase the market rent for that tenant. So utilities is something you kind of want to know before looking at properties and seeing properties. I would say it is better to have separate utilities. So that's going to be your heating and electric. Heating and electric, it's really good if you have a separate water heater and a separate boiler just for each tenant, or a separate heating system for each tenant. That means tenants will be billed monthly, and they're going to be paying these two bills. Water, especially in Mass, is, if it's not separately metered, it's going to be landlord paid. So, but separate electrical panels, you're going to be looking at things such as, if it's a 2-unit, 2 separate electrical boxes. For heating, that would be a separate individual unit for each system. It's smarter if you think about it from a perspective of you'd want to be in control of not having like a $500-$600 heating bill. You're responsible if it is landlord paid. Same with electric, same deal there. You don't want to be responsible for a huge electric bill if it's separately metered. If it's individual, they get billed monthly, and that's how it's going to be really streamlined when you know, okay, I'm starting to look at a few properties here. I can understand I might be taking under market rent, but I see it's separate utilities and I like the location. So maybe the property's worth me seeing. And evictions, the question was, should I worry about evictions if I'm inheriting under market rent tenants? And the first thing is, what your agent should typically do is, when you're purchasing the building, if the tenant doesn't have a written agreement, they may have a verbal agreement, and you can get something called an estoppel, which basically says the tenant information that's going to go into the purchase and sale in Mass, at least. That's going to say the tenant, each age, or everyone over 18. It's going to say, date of birth, You're going to get likely how much they're paying in rent, have they ever been late, what utilities are billed in their name, things of that nature. And with that estoppel, you're going to be able to draft a new agreement when you own the property on it. You're going to want to get them on a written agreement. So I'd recommend don't strictly look to the eviction route offhand. It could be very costly, especially in Mass. If you're able to avoid that just by taking more time to understand the situation, if you're inheriting tenants and they're paying under market rent, it's possible they've been there for 30, 35 years, where the owner is retiring from the business and he doesn't want to raise the rents because he knows they pay every month on time and he's okay with that. But I wouldn't worry about that. You can likely get an estoppel in your agreement, and that's exactly what the tenants will be not paying. And that's exactly what you'll be seeing to know exactly what they're doing over time.